Hey, buddy, this is Greg Reffner on the Contact Center KPI podcast. And today we are joined by Tom Moskal, VP of Global Client Services at OP360. Tom, please say hi.
Hi, how you doing, Greg? Really great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Super excited to chat with you. Um, as our listeners know, we like to focus on one KPI per episode to really dive into. And when we reached out to Tom, Tom wanted to discuss first call resolution as the metric that he really likes to focus on. So, Tom, before we kind of dive into some of the tactical things, it's always good for some background as to why this is important to you. Out of all the KPIs, like why does this one matter the most to you?
Yeah, so I've been in the outsourcing space in BPO for the last 16 years. I've held every role that you can imagine. Started on the phone as an agent, worked my way up, through supervisor levels, everything within operations, and over to client services. In that time, I have really supported a lot of major organizations throughout the globe. I also look at myself as as a consumer myself, and I always look at that first call resolution as really an indicator because I know as someone like myself that likes to self-service, I like to not contact support if I can help it at all. And if there's one thing I don't like more than contacting support, it's contacting support again for the same problem. And I know personally that if I do, and that becomes the case, I'm much more likely to be dissatisfied with the interaction at the end. So when I think about first contact resolution, I really look at it in the lens of customer satisfaction. I look at it, from a lens of everything, handle time, quality. It's all really correlated when you really drill into it.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about all the different things, kind of like what you allude to, there's a lot of different kind of maybe, I don't want to call them sub KPIs, but maybe things that correlate really well with that first call resolution metric. You mentioned call handle time, maybe customer satisfaction scores, things like that. They all kind of fall into this, can you get this thing handled the first time as fast as possible? Um, so I think that makes a lot of sense. Um, Throughout the course of your journey, kind of going from agents to all the way up to VP, um, and across all the different environments you've worked with, has this always been your main focus and always something that you've really kind of felt strongly about, or has that maybe shifted and you've kind of matured into this being the important one?
Yeah, throughout a lot of my career, I mean, we look at a lot of different KPIs, and so if of course everything really relates back to customer satisfaction, reducing customer churn or turnover, and ultimately, I've always kind of looked at where is the root cause of the problem. And so, that's why it really has been important to me. I remember years and years ago going through just troves of ticket data and really kind of drilling through and seeing, and this is, before AI really does a lot of this for us, but, really just kind of drilling in manually to some of these tickets and seeing what happened on these interactions, and why customers contact us back. Why were they dissatisfied? And in a lot of cases, you can really find percentage points of customer satisfaction in issue resolution.
Yeah, that's and those percentage points kind of ultimately roll down to the bottom line too, right? If we're able to get people done faster, especially for clients when you're in the outsourcing world as a BPO, you're already operating on slim margins. And so the faster we can move those customers through the resolution process, you can use that to go out and then attract new customers. There's nothing really negative about handling things successfully the first time around. Have you ever seen that maybe backfire at all, where maybe you're incentivizing first call resolution too much, and as a result, agents are maybe pushing to get things done faster than they should?
That's an interesting question, and I think the answer is we've seen it all. So yeah, I think so. But I also think too, when you talk about the resolution rate, a lot of companies look at it differently, right? So you could look at it from a 24-hour contact rate, heck, you could really put any margin on it, but typically you'll see either 24 or 7 day 30, right? So did a customer contact us back within 24 hours? Did they contact us back within a week, or did they contact us back within 30 days? And that's going to really highly depend on the different industries that you're in, and stuff like that. So I think incentivizing first contact resolution, to your point, does have to be done very carefully, because ultimately, you have to put that really ownership level on the agent of really driving that, the buck stops here kind of mentality. I can resolve your issue today, and really looking at that at the end of that call and saying, do you think that the customer is going to contact us back, or do you think that this issue is now behind us? And if the customer does contact us back 3 days, 5 days later, it's for the same issue, or is it for a different issue entirely?
So I want to drill down into that just a little bit, because there's some subjectiveness to that decision, right? It's not always black and white. And so in situations where there is some maybe subjective nature, some gray area in terms of that agent being able to make that decision and taking ownership of that, um, how do you coach to that when they feel like it was resolved, but maybe as a supervisor or someone on the QA team, they're going back and listening to it and going, that wasn't resolved.
Yeah.
How do you coach
I
that?
like that question, and sometimes that really comes down to process, because there's sometimes where you reviewed some of these interactions with with the agents, or the TL catches us, or quality catches us, and we say, why didn't we resolve this customer's issue? And the answer is that it was out of scope, right? The end of the line here said that, hey, we need to transfer this off, or the end of the line said that this is something that we're not going to accommodate. And so I think that there's, definitely room there where we need to look at the process. And that's where we lean on our team leaders to really be empowered to bring those examples, those situations up to the management team, up through my team, so that we can communicate those process gaps where they exist with our client partners, right? Because ultimately, if there are gaps in the process, our client partners, they want to close those as well. And if they can close some of those gaps and reduce those callbacks on those particular processes, if you will, that can really mean a reduction in headcount requirement for them, for
Yeah.
instance, right? So
Yeah.
there's dollars saved immediately by closing those gaps on those processes. So we actually have a responsibility, as a vendor partner, at the agent level, to the team lead level, up through our management, to identify those things, to identify where those processes could be better, and bring those back, and ultimately everybody benefits, from that.
Yeah, I love that. So you talked about process. You hit on process a couple times. I often think of people, process, technology. Kind of the process falls kind of in the middle of that triad, if you will. Um, where does technology play in that process for you guys?
I mean, well, technology has always, I think, been there, right? Since I was a technical support representative back in 2008, 2009, I can remember very specifically having technology being introduced where, it would kind of follow along. It was like a virtual checklist to go through that you would need to follow, right, in order to get to that resolution. And at the time, of course, it's a tough thing, right? I know better than the technology. But ultimately, if you think about the fact that that was how many years ago, 15 years ago, 14 years ago, and where we've advanced to today, really. that's kind of where the rubber meets the road, right? So the process in a lot of ways are defined inside that technology, right? So we write the process. Here's the process flow or the process map. These are the steps that we need to go through to get from point A to point Z, and you go through those steps. That's where I think that technology is really advancing. So you have the not just the necessarily the checklist, but you also have interaction analytics that'll review all of the calls and transcribe all of those calls and categorize where we're bucketing these issues. So a lot of those pieces can provide a lot of answers, right, to what you're saying. I think that, as the technology advances, we're able to kind of get to some of those resolutions a little bit better.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's get in some tactical things. Let's pick two things that you feel like have the most profound impact on first call resolution. If you were to only have to pick two things for the rest of your career to kind of as a tactical thing that could impact first call resolution, or if our listeners were looking for two big takeaways that they should consider doing to impact that metric, what would they be?
It's an excellent question. I think that the first piece of that um, is agent ownership, right? And it's a culture of ownership that we need to drive, right? So this is something maybe a little bit outside the technology piece, but really a customer or an agent looking at, this contact through their own lens and saying, is this issue really resolved? Like I said before, I think that that culture of ownership really does help to drive the actual resolution and making sure that the customers feel as though that they got cared for. I think the
Yeah.
second piece is, and it's not really solidified in one, because there's a lot of nuance to first contact resolution in various different industries, depending on what service we're providing. But I think that really, the data aggregation and data analysis really has to be very solid. We have to know how we're calculating those metrics, and really what are not just the top contact drivers, for resolution. By that, what I mean is a scorecard. You could see what are the top three reasons why a customer contacted us back. That's really, anyone can tell you that, right? You look at the data, it's gonna be able to show you that. But how do we then correlate that to making an impact to that overall KPI, right? So if we're looking at, for instance, 24-hour first contact resolution, you got to break it down even further and say, great. So they called us back within 24 hours, but what percentage of that called us back within three? Right? Is there, did this customer, just immediately contact the center back? Did they not believe what was told? Can we review? So I think that, from a concentration standpoint, it's really understanding the industry that you're in, understanding that the service that you're providing, and understanding not just the top reasons for someone contacting us back, but really how we can actually impact, the overall service.
Interesting. I promised you in our kind of prep, Tom, that we might go off on a tangent. And we're about to do that. I didn't want to let you
Right.
down by not fulfilling my promise. Um, have you ever seen it where like you'll have somebody or a client who sends out like follow-up emails with action items that were discussed on the phone conversation? I can't tell you how many times I've gotten off a call with somebody and I'm calling to get support on something and I hang up. I'm like, crap, what did they tell me to do? And I wasn't writing it down or I was driving. Like I think maybe my bank comes to mind most often in terms of, I'm trying to get something like an email to me, like, hey, here was a recap. Here's your action items. Go do these things. Have you ever seen
Yeah,
that
they exist.
deployed?
They exist for sure. Yep.
Okay. Okay. All right. Maybe I have the wrong bank then. Um, Kind of the inverse of our last question. What are let's just pick one. What is the one thing that you would advise companies to not do, or the thing that maybe hurts first call resolution the
Yeah,
most?
I think the one thing that I would encourage companies to do is to really understand what your target is. It's
Yeah.
very interesting to me when a company, for instance, will set a target um, to I'm just going to use a round number of 75%. Great. What is the reasoning or rationale behind 75% versus a 76 or 77%? So I think that, most often targets will likely get set when the KPI kind of starts to get measured. But then infrequently we go back and really look at, is that the right target, and what is that right target based on that metric? Because I think that a lot of times if you are setting that and not being kind of mathematically sound behind it, what'll end up happening is you're either hitting the KPI or you're not, right? And if you're hitting the KPI, everybody's gonna, break their arm, patting themselves on the back. But at the same point, are you really actually impacting that metric for the customer satisfaction or for the customer resolution? And so that's really, I think, the biggest piece of advice that I would say is make sure that you're frequently looking at that, especially if you notice various different trends, if you know that there's seasonality to the services that you're providing, and do we have a spike in X call volume during Y months, and how does that impact that score? Because it's not necessarily about being good; it's about providing the right service, to the customers so that they feel as though they're cared for. If customers don't feel like they're cared for, if customers do have tons of interactions where they need to contact back, or they're spending a lot of time, customers are going to tell you, and worse so, they might leave you. And so I
Yeah.
think that you really need to make sure that you're letting that data tell the story, and make sure that you're measuring it correctly, so that again you're not celebrating when you shouldn't be, or really getting very you could get very disheartened if you're trying to really just get that last couple points of FCR out, and you're really pulling all those levers. You could end up falling into the trap, Greg, like you mentioned earlier, which is, are you going to start incenting the wrong things to hit a target that may not necessarily be, the right fit?
Yeah. So to summarize that last point, because I think there was a couple things in there. One, it was know why you're picking your target, 75% versus 76%. If you don't know why you're picking that target, it's almost like you're shooting in the dark, right? And for a newer organization, you might take some historical data from previous companies, make a an educated guess, right? But then you ultimately you need to know why you're picking that number, and then have to know why you're picking that number in the first place, and then know why you're picking the number you're picking. So I think there was a couple of good good takeaways in that one. Tom, to wrap this up, one piece of advice for anybody looking to improve first call resolution,
I
what would
think
it be?
there are some very good and basic Six Sigma methodologies, Lean Six Sigma methodologies, where you can look at some of your various different data, and make some good correlations to that data. Very specifically, you really should look at everything within the process that you're completing, right? So if customer satisfaction is suffering, and first call resolution is down, I think there's a good correlation there. If you're finding that first contact resolution is not impacting your FCR or vice versa, then you really need to look at that correlation and look then at some of the processes that are driving those contacts.
Love that. Love that. We crammed a lot into this 19 minutes, Tom. I appreciate you spending some time with us. This has been super helpful. I know I've learned a couple things here. I always do have some things that I take away from our conversation. So I appreciate you spending some time with us. And thank you for sharing
Thanks for having
everything
me.
with our
Bye.
listeners today.